Hello, welcome to volume 42 of Ask a Brit. This is a very special episode of Ask a Brit today in which we talk about books. And that's because the number 42, of course, is rather synonymous with this book here, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, one of my favourite all-time books, as it happens. And I thought we'd just pay homage, or is it homage? Do you put an H in there? Who cares? Of course, this is the format in which I ask you fine people to ask me any question you like, so long as you use the hashtag AskABrit, and starting today and going forward, so long as it fits in with the theme. Of course, as I said a moment ago, the theme this week is books. Stay tuned until the end of this video to find out the theme we're going with next week. Now, the first question this week comes from Mark Oldgeezer, and Mark Oldgeezer asks, have you read any of Susie Dent's books? I have 3 or 4 of them, and they're among my favourites. Mark, you know, it's kind of sinful in a way that I have not yet read any of Susie Dent's books, but I will say this, when I was about 11 or 12, I went to see Countdown live. Now, for anybody who's not aware, Countdown is a game show in the United Kingdom where people are tested on their word knowledge, or specifically how to construct letters to make words and therefore get points. It's kind of like Scrabble, just filmed on TV and with a bit of maths involved. But Susie Dent is a famous lexicographer, and she, since about 1992, has consistently been the person in Dictionary Corner who, you know, when a word is contested or anything like that, she will go through the dictionary, find it and say, hey, it's a word. You know, this person gets the points. The person who contested it is an idiot. She wouldn't quite put it like that. She's a bit more polite than I am. But I do follow her on Twitter as of about 6 months ago. So that's the equivalent of reading books these days, as we all know. One thing I will say, if you are interested in books on language and specifically to do with British and American English, one book I would recommend, and I'm recommending it before I've actually read it, but I have it on pre-order, is The Prodigal Tongue by Lynn Murphy, or Linguist as she's known on Twitter. I've no doubt it's going to be excellent. Anyway, I do follow her on Twitter as well. I follow all the great ones on Twitter, and you should too. And when making these comparisons, she goes to depths that, you know, I could only dream of because I don't have the time or the qualifications. She's a professor at the University of Sussex. What are you going to do? Okay, the next 2 questions sort of fall into the same category. They're from L.A. Cooper and Brock Jonas. And I'll read L.A.'s question first. In school, my junior year literature class was devoted to American literature, and my senior year was devoted to British literature. Was there any required reading of American literature in your schools when growing up? And if so, what did you have to study? And Brooke asks, are the books you read in middle/high school in England different from the ones we read in America? So to attack, if that's the right word, L.A. Cooper's question first, we do American literature, but it's very much confined, I think, to books like To Kill a Mockingbird. In fact, that's the only American book I can remember reading at school, I think, because outside of that, we did quite a bit of Shakespeare. I remember doing Romeo and Juliet, which, you know, technically isn't a book in the novel sense. It is play. And Educating Rita, which, again, is a play. We did plays mainly, weirdly enough. But we did do To Kill a Mockingbird. I can't think of much else. What did you study, American books-wise?
You said doo-doo.
Doo-doo. Doo-doo. Is that a book?
No.
It's a piece of poo.
We did some plays, we did some books.
Did you do To Kill a Mockingbird?
Yeah, we studied it. And we studied Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
Hamlet.
Yeah.
Later on.
You didn't do Catcher in the Rye because it had been banned, right?
Actually, I think one of the literature classes did.
Did they?
Because I was old enough that it didn't matter that it was banned anymore.
I read Catcher in the Rye on my own. It was years later, after school, I remember. It was just never introduced to me at school, so I never came across it. It does sound like, and this is more to answer Brooke's question, it sounds like there is quite a bit of a crossover between the books we read in school. I mean, I think that you probably did Shakespeare, didn't you?
Yeah.
Shakespeare, I think, gets studied here, at least in English literature classes, just as it does in the UK. It's kind of a staple. But maybe there are 1 or 2 other books that have become staples in either country that differ from one or the other. But I'm not as familiar because I've not been in school for 20 years, which is a sad fact. Okay, next question comes from Anna Addison in Iowa. And Anna asks, have you ever read a book where the characters are supposed to be British and it's set in Britain, but they don't sound British. So I enjoy, Anna says, those murder by gaslight type books, and I now notice when they are written by Americans. Well, I can't think of a book per se, like a novel, as it were. I just said per se and as it were in the same sentence, which is always fun. But I did once play Winston Smith in a stage version of George Orwell's 1984. And you could tell it was written by an American because the characters, even though it was set in a dystopian, vision of Britain, they were stereotypes of British people, and they were saying all of these things that these films from the golden era would have us say that are no longer true to life now. So things like "Oh, darling," and what was the other one? This was really weird. So Winston meets Julia. They're about the same age, but they're both in this dystopian world, and they're starting this sort of secret romance away from the higher powers. And he says, "Oh, you're so small, like a child." Yeah, I don't think that it was the American in them that wrote that, but that's just a side point. It was a pretty badly written script, and that's something that stands out to me. But there were these just really weird lines that I think Americans, or some Americans, might expect British people to say, and they just did not fit with the dystopian world laid out by Mr. George Orwell. Okay, and the next question comes from Killer Mongero. I love that name still to this day. And Killer Mongero asks, in honour of the number 42 and Douglas Adams, do you still think digital watches are a really neat idea? I don't think watches in general are still a neat idea. You do. I bought you one for Christmas. Yeah, I bought her one for Christmas because I know she needs one in the classroom. Can't have phones out there, or it's not as easy to have them out. So that makes sense. But in my life, I have no need of watches. Now, I know that the question, of course, was tongue-in-cheek and was absolutely referencing the line from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but this is a serious point, and it's something I need to address. Watches are outdated. We have phones.
But there are smartwatches and watches that count your steps and...
I can count my steps. Why do I need
Fitbits.
a Fitbit? There's so much of it now. There's so much tech that we don't need actual watches. He's talking about digital watches. He or she is talking about digital watches. And that's different from watches with 5,000 apps on it. I can access my YouTube channel from a watch. I don't want to because I've got a computer and a phone.
I just have a regular watch.
Yeah, I know you do. It's got a ticker on it and that. Hands. All right, next question comes from Susan Ray, and Susan asks, Lawrence, I'm a die-hard fan of British authors and have acquired a weird understanding of the UK from authors such as the late great Terry Pratchett, as well as Neil Gaiman and Douglas Adams, among others. Have you read any of that sort of thing, and what do you think? Now, in fairness to Susan, her question did actually come before I posted last week's video in which I referenced Douglas Adams and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But as was stated at the beginning of this video and videos that I've done in the past, he is one of my favourite authors, or I should say that the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is one of my favourite books. And I'm a big fan of that. I've read a couple of Terry Pratchett books back in the day when I was at college. I didn't get as much into him as a lot of people have, but I still like that kind of surreal world that's created in both his books and Douglas Adams. And another writer that I would throw out there that's also British and also writes surrealist writing is a man called Robert Rankin. Check him out because he often writes books that are a riff on existing film titles or things like that, but they take place in a world that is sort of recognizable as a place in England. Like, he sets a lot of his books in Brentford, but then makes Brentford a very surreal place with all manner of things going on that are unusual but funny, and there are lots of film references. So I would definitely check him out. Okay, and the next question, K. Rowe asks, did you read the worldwide phenomena that is the Twilight series? Are you Team Edward or Team Jacob? I've not read it, and I've not read it, in fairness, because of the backlash against it. Maybe I should have a more open mind. I don't know. You've seen the films, right? Are they a true indictment of the books?
How old is the person who's asking this?
K. Rowe, how old are you? That's a very personal question. I can't go any further with that line of questioning. I've not read them, and therefore I can't give a definite answer to your second question, but I will go with Team Edward. Just because my favourite king of all time was Edward VIII, because he had the balls to stand up to the establishment and quit and marry an American woman, which, I can relate to. He also dabbled with the Nazis, though, so there is that. That's it for this week's episode of Ask a Brit, and as promised, I will now announce next week's topic. Next week's topic, in honour of the fact that it is going to be International Whiskey Day, is alcohol. So keep your questions coming in about that very topic using the hashtag AskABrit. Until then, you can follow me, of course, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and do go to our website at lostinthepond.com. And don't forget, if you would like to support this channel in any way you see fit, mainly monetarily, go to patreon.com/lostinthepond today. Until next week, cheerio. Bye. Oh, I missed a question. Damn it. Rob Norris asks, will you be closing episode 42 with "So long and thanks for all the fish"?